next series is called Me Then. Hashtag Me Then. I want you to follow it. Why? Because you're getting a chance to hear from so many different people, their thoughts and their ideas as it relates to things that you would advise your younger self, just to give yourself a better lens as you relate to moving forward in your future. That being said, today is exciting because our guest is Joelle Murchison. Joelle is a dear friend of mine that I've known for, wow, I guess over 20 years, and had a chance to work with her in Connecticut. Joelle, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure.
So Joelle, what are you up to these days?
Oh gosh, I am incredibly busy for what I keep saying is the good news, bad news story. You know, certainly we are in the midst of a pandemic, or a double pandemic, as I would describe it. And up until George Floyd's death, I was, like many other entrepreneurs and a relatively new entrepreneur, sort of navigating what this new normal was going to look like in transitioning my in-person services to virtual services, and recognizing that likely there would not be as much income as I might have anticipated. And then sadly, George Floyd was murdered on video in front of all of us, and the world changed. Now, lots of things could have happened as a result of that, but one of the things that has really significantly pivoted my reality is that organizations, private, nonprofit, community, you name it, have been awakened to this thing called racial inequity that many of us have lived with as a part of our realities. And so I have been asked to come in to many settings to help navigate through conversations around this. But most importantly, once we've gotten beyond the initial dialogue, there are a number of organizations who are really committing to actually do something different. And so I have been swamped in a very interesting transition from pre-George Floyd, where I was thinking of wonderful meals to make and visiting Pinterest on a regular basis to think of the latest cocktail for a Zoom happy hour. Now I have no time for that because I have been literally from morning to night in the midst of helping organizations to make this shift, which is really my passion and what I intended to do. So it's good news, bad news, why we got here, but I'm grateful to know that maybe I'll have the opportunity to help this nation finally change for the better.
Great. Now, it's important for the audience to realize that your background is in the nonprofit space, in higher education, as well as in the corporate arena, with a theme of diversity, ranging from inroads all the way to United Technologies Corporation, working with national diversity conferences, becoming the chief diversity officer at Travelers, and then subsequently becoming the chief diversity officer at Connecticut's flagship institution, the University of Connecticut, all the way to exec mommy group. And I think, given what you just said, it's good that you're able to manage through this, because those mommy skills are what's probably helping you navigate all the opportunity that's in front of you. So you've been given a unique opportunity to provide advice to your younger self. And you're sitting on a park bench, and here comes younger Joelle. And she's just innocent and wide open and just ready to receive advice and counsel on how she could, advance through life better. Talk to me about what you would share with younger Joelle around family.
Oh gosh, well, younger Joelle was an only child, essentially, my mother's only child, and that's how she grew up. And so her reality was, I'm not convinced that all of the things that people say about only children being selfish, none of that stuff I really held to be true, because younger Joelle always wanted friends over. Couldn't wait until her cousin came over, was constantly looking for someone to play with, because as an only child of what we used to call older parents, my mother had me at 37, which is so laughable now because so many people are having their first child at that age. Younger Joelle was really, really enjoyed being around people. And I realize now that some of that is the energy that I look for from people. I'm an absolute extrovert, though younger Joelle, I think, was much more reserved in her extrovertness, or I think a little misunderstood. She seemed, at least as I reflect upon her, happy and joyous and sort of like just living life in their moments. But one thing I would tell her about family is that I think as she learned, that family is the family that you choose, right? So being an only child, it was totally fine and has borne itself out to be, even as I've gotten older and sort of taken on new friends who've become family, even into my 40s. That family is who you make of it, and that whoever you choose your family to be, or whatever you choose your family to look like, is how you define it, and how important it is. Family is really defined by how we make it. And but you got to pour into it regardless, whatever segment of family. Building and developing relationships happen over time, continuously.
Excellent. You have had a very dynamic career. And so now Joelle is leaning in and she's listening and just absorbing everything you've just said about family. And now she's ready to have another conversation. And she now says, hey, tell me a little bit about my career. What are some things you can give me as guidance when it comes down to the career that I choose and how I navigate through?
It's interesting. I feel like at the time that she was coming up, we did not have, I mean, when I was in college, we didn't have the internet. So when I think about now and what young people have access to, I mean, even then, you read a magazine and you saw the name, and this was my story. I saw the name of an organization in a magazine and I thought, wow, I'd really like to intern there. And I wrote a letter and waited for the letter to get there, and then called to see if the letter got there, and then waited for someone to respond, that kind of thing. And I think I would encourage her to be a little more bold in deciding what career opportunities were available. I mean, I'll say that, going into college, because of the limitations of guidance counselors and family and confidants, what have you, people didn't really know what there was that you could be. And so no one could have told little Joelle then, oh, you're going to be, after a career in corporate and higher ed and nonprofit, you're going to own your own firm. What? I would have never imagined that. My mother's um, uh, example was having worked for 40 years for the U.S. Social Security Administration. And so, I knew I didn't want to do that. That seemed like the most boring thing ever, like all those papers and files, and it was just terrible. They didn't even have different color manila folders back then. So little Joelle knew she didn't want to do that, but at that time, there wasn't really the ability to be as broad and wide in terms of thinking, even financially, right? In terms of what had to be done. So I would just encourage her to, you know, to sort of just be bold and really be much more open to the possibilities of what could be. Some of her decisions over time were very much constrained based upon what other people thought, and so I would encourage her to, to live her life for her, and live it fully. I look back now at decisions and I'm like, it would have been a year. Like, a year is like that in time. Yes, you should have gone to California for the full ride to grad school instead of staying safe, closer to home, so things like that, I would tell her without a doubt. Be more bold, be adventurous. There's a point where you'll have to sit down and be still, but it wasn't then, so do it, go out and do it. And I wonder sometimes how different my life would have been if I had gone to California for grad school and not stayed in the Northeast. So definitely be bold, like just do it. Like, why not? What's the worst that could happen?
I love it. I love it. Be bold. Just do it. Why not? Well, I'm glad you stayed in Northeast because you and I would have never met.
That's true.
So we also know that what complements a great career is the level of involvement that an individual chooses to make. You have been involved in just about every service entity that I can imagine, from the church to the sorority to the community. I mean, even in your career, some of your jobs were very specific to community initiatives. Talk to me about what you would say to Joelle about involvement.
Oh gosh. So there was an interest inventory when I worked for Inroads that we used to have the students take, called the Strong Interest Inventory. I don't know if it still exists, but one of the instructions they used to give is that there are likely answers to this inventory that will be things that you'll say, what? I would never want to do that, or I'd never want to explore those things. And what they said is that it just meant that you'd have to, that should be somewhere present in your life. So when I think about involvement, what you do in your 9 to 5 or in your day job, it's a bonus if it's around your passion. And I have felt very, very blessed to be able to work in places and spaces and do things that were very much in alignment with my values. I know that's not everybody's reality, but what I have also been able to do is to really draw connections between my workplace and my community in very intentional ways that I think, even when I have not been involved, have left behind some connectors that have changed the way those organizations have been able to navigate. So I think about, the Morgan State University relationship. And I think about, quite frankly, in young Joelle's life, the individuals who are Morgan alum, who it's almost like full circle, who were very present at that time, just sort of as encouragement and what have you. And then to be able to serve on Morgan State's foundation board and to make that connection and solidify that connection for travelers that is still existing today. And so those are the things that, for me, I've always felt that I am somewhat of a connector, a resource provider. Nothing makes me happier than to be able to help connect someone to something that can help them to be more successful. So what I would say to little Joelle is, these involvements or connections that you have, they may not necessarily at the end of the day be about you. They may be about the broader community or someone else, something that has to happen, and you might be the broker to the end of that relationship, but it may not necessarily be about you. It may not be apparent where that connector point is salient for you, but do it anyway, because there's something that you bring uniquely to that relationship that ultimately will provide an opportunity for someone else. And that is the thing that at the end of the day, to me, matters most.
Focus on what matters. Excellent and sage advice. I'm sure little Joelle, we're showing her image right now, would value and certainly leverage for greater positioning. Look, Joelle, thank you so much for taking the time to give me your energy and to share with others what you would advise your younger self.
My pleasure.
Looking forward to more dialogue around Me Then. We've just had with us Joelle Murchison. And until next time, let's continue to activate and elevate for the win.